Hello everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel, Homoeopathy Super Sessions by Dr. Jarvis. Today I'll be doing the chapter 1, the second half of it, Hahnemannian Thought, which is continued, which is from the book on Notes on Miasm by Dr. Perez Ortega. Kretschmer and Pende reduced these types to only 4. So in the previous video, we had seen the Trousseau's concept of diathesis, in which his many followers give different names to the different diatheses. Ultimately, it led to the downfall and the important work, whatever Trousseau had done, that wasn't recognized and it had its own death. However, Kretschmer and Pende reduce the types to only 4. So out of the numerous headings under which the diathesis was named by Trousseau, Kretschmer and Pende only reduced it to 4. This enabled them to make extensive use of the concept in studying the sickness. So therefore, when they studied the sickness, whatever 4 types they had reduced it to, the diathesis, they were able to make good use of it. From it, they deduced applications in all sociological aspects of human existence, as noted by Dr. Romero. The starting point taken by Kretschmer, Pende, and Maranon was the basis of endocrinological system. So, the starting point of their classification of diathesis was based upon the endocrinological system. It included the knowledge of human pathology, and disease was predominance or alteration of one or other of these glands. So they included the study of pathology, and they said that disease occurred because of either one of these endocrinological glands were very prominent or they were altered, as a result of which the disease took place. This is, of course, a positive and very valid procedure for a predominantly materialistic medicine, whose physiological processes have been more or less demonstrable since the time of Claude Bernard. So, this cause, which was very valid, it was basically, you could say, the materialistic school had given more importance to it. And also, whatever physiological processes were going on, they have been more or less demonstrated since the time of Claude Bernard. The significance is the view of all these medical thinkers on the manifest importance of the predisposing terrain, which virtually generates or at least moderates the sickness. So, the significance of this was that the medical thinkers gave an important to a predisposing term, the terrain. So they gave importance to the terrain of the individual, which virtually generates or at least moderates the sickness. So there's a terrain, as a result of which, because of this terrain in an individual, the sickness is moderated or it is generated. Let us see what this terrain consists of later on. Maranon states, the science of the human constitution has been reborn. It will be fundamental for new generation of physicians oriented toward the scientific and imbued with biological knowledge. So, Maranon states that whatever is the human constitution, it has been reborn, and there are many fundamental principles which are scientific in nature and also which are embedded by the biological knowledge. In agreement with the general pathological considerations of such modern authors as Dr. Perez Tamayo, pathology has passed through different epochs, from the macroscopic to the microscopic, and now to the biochemical, from the humoral to the organic, the tissues, the cells, and ultimately the molecules. So, as you can see, these are the different epochs or the different important landmarks in which pathology has advanced. From macroscopic, microscopic, biochemical, humoral, organic, tissue, and ultimately the molecules. Now let us see something more about it. The humoral corresponds to the hypothetical phase of medicine with its aim of explaining the ultimate cause of sickness. So in this definition, the humoral will be the hypothetical phase of medicine, which will explain the ultimate cause of the sickness. The organic phase corresponds to the beginning of the analytical study of the organs by autopsy and observation of the changes affected in the different parts of the organism by sickness. So the organic phase will be the study of the organs by autopsy, or when the patient dies, autopsy is done, and what are the different changes in different organs they are noted. And also by observation of the changes affected in different parts on the organism by the sickness. So when a sickness is there in an individual, what parts it affects, what organ it affects, that also is taken into consideration. The tissue phase corresponds to a more advanced state of analysis, which does not pause at the limits of the organ, but to discover the relation among their various parts through the resemblance of the tissue components. So in the tissue phase, it is more advanced. It not only tells us the specific part of the organ, but it will also tell us what type of tissue has been involved. The investigator recognizes that though man is made of organs, these organs have certain constitutive tissues in common. These very tissues are formed of cells, and then excuse me, these very tissues are formed of cells, and their microscopic analysis enables us to see as individuals communicating and relating with many other, resembling them with the whole. So basically, the tissues are there, they are formed of various cells, and if you see under the microscope, you will be able to see the different cells are there which are communicating with each other, but they resemble the whole. It forms a conglomerate which yields a human organism at its ultimate outcome. So all these cells basically in all the different tissues, its outcome is the human organism. In the first stage, pathology was merely assumed. In the second stage, it was sought in the organs which were discovered and described. So initially, an assumption was there or an hypothesis was there. That is the first stage of pathology. As it went ahead, the second stage was there where they identified what organs were affected. In the third stage, researchers poke around in tissues constituting these organs, and now they do the same in the cells, which constitutes the innumerable individuals making up the human race. And in the third stage, the researchers will see what tissues are there in the organs, and in these tissues, what cells are present, which make up the whole human race. Now, in an event, greater excess of analytical zeal, the cell is broken down into its various components, and the cause of sickness is sought in them. So, furthermore, they further dissect the cell. That in the disease, what happens? The cell is broken down, and as a result of which, the concept of sickness was introduced. With the same zeal and with the aid of biochemistry to elevate our knowledge of the morphic processes from a minimum to a maximum, and thus be able better to influence it. So with the same zeal and enthusiasm, the medical researchers, with the aid of biochemistry, was being able to identify whatever morphic processes were going on from a minimum to a maximum. That means when biochemistry was not discovered, they could find out what organs were affected, what was the tissue affected. But so that was some minimum thing what they had found out. But once biochemistry was discovered, or they incorporated biochemistry, then it became maximum. And they were able to, and thus to be able to better to influence it. So as the discovery went on progressing, or as science went on progressing, the concept of disease became more and more clear. Perhaps physiology can be conceived and explained in terms of biochemical changes or processes in the nucleic acids and the other cellular components. So Ortega says that perhaps physiology, if you can see it well or if you can understand it well, it can be explained in terms of biochemical changes or processes in the nucleic acids and other cellular components. So in the cell, different reactions take place, which can be perceived by the individual in a more better fashion. It should be noted that the cell in an individual in itself and at this level occurs all the changes and functions which follow upon one another in the organic whole, that is in the human being. So whatever cell is there, the unit of life, it forms the full organism, and whatever changes are there occurring in it, or whatever functions are there which are working normally, and when sickness comes, they get abnormal. Basically, they will influence the full individual as a whole, that is the human being. Mayoral Pardo, who, as we must not forget, was the founder of the Department of Therapeutics, both in our university and in the School of Military Medicine. He tells us that physicians should realize that infectious disease cannot be dominated even when the correct medicines are used. So he tells us that, Pardo tells us that the physician should realize that the infectious disease cannot be dominated even when the correct medicine is used. So when the correct medicine is used, the medicine overcomes the disease, and so the disease cannot be dominated. As there is an upsurge of interest in the concept of terrain. So out here, the interest of the concept of terrain also will be elevated. The physician returned to the concept of therapeutics, which endeavor to modify the patient's constitution. So furthermore, what do the physicians do? They return to the therapeutics, or the drugs, or the armament of drugs which are useful to modify or to mitigate the disease. So these medicines, they can modify the patient's constitution. As therapeutics is concerned, the notion of terrain is the living organism considered as a complete system. So now he'll tell you what constitutes a terrain. So as therapeutics is concerned, the notion of terrain is the living organism. So a terrain is what? The living organism is considered as a complete system in which anatomy, physiology, psychological aspects, hereditary and acquired characteristics, as well as environmental influences are present as analytical aspects of an indivisible whole. So the terrain will consist of the whole individual, which further consists of the anatomy, the physiology, the psychological concept or the aspect, hereditary and acquired characteristics, as well as environmental influences. So all of this, it makes up the full individual or the terrain of the individual. Thus, the dominant constitutional illness is the terrain and the biotype and the biotypology of the patient. So whatever illness is there or whatever chief complaints are there, they are nothing but the terrain of the patients, which are the imprints of the biotypology of the patients. As I told you in the first video, biotypology will also take into consideration the anatomy, the physiology, the psychological aspects, along with the environmental influences, taking into consideration the hereditary and acquired diseases. Many authors have examined constitutional aspects of medicine. It compels us to reconsider Hahnemann's legacy, upon which he worked for 12 consecutive years for the achievement of a correct curative method. So many authors have examined the constitutional aspects of medicine. So many authors have given their opinions on the medicines regarding the constitutional aspects. And our great master, Dr. Hahnemann, also, after working for 12 long years, he also found out a correct curative method. That is the homeopathic system of medicine. He urged on his disciples to point to the point of exhaustion, the chronic disease of the myasthenia. So Dr. Hahnemann found out that the point of exhaustion, or when the person falls sick, and he falls sick because of the exhaustion. So this exhaustion occurs because of what? Because of the noxious influence upon the individual. And this noxious influence, is the chronic disease of the chronic myasthenia. So many works have been consulted Ortega has written in his book that many works have been consulted, as you can see on the screen itself. Excuse me. And if you want to know more details about the work, you can definitely refer page number 16, in which a big list is given of the different works in which Ortega has consulted in order to write this chapter on the Hahnemannian thought. So that's all. So we have completed this first chapter. The second chapter will be coming up soon. Please be stay tuned for more. Kindly give your comments and suggestions so that I can improve the video if you want. If you want to do any other chapter also from any other book, do let me know. If and when the time permits, I will definitely do it. Thank you for your patient listening.